In a world where wealth speaks louder than words, you'd think that billionaires never get turned away at luxury showrooms. But when Naomi Caldwell, a self-made automotive titan, walked into her own dealership, she wasn't met with open arms or champagne toasts. She was dismissed. Not because she lacked the money, not because she didn't fit the profile of a serious buyer, but because of something much deeper, much uglier, the color of her skin. What unfolded next wasn't just a personal awakening. It sparked a war, a battle that would ripple through an entire industry built on exclusivity and silent prejudice. Sitting behind the sleek glass walls of her Manhattan office, Naomi gazed at the sprawling skyline of New York City. To most, those glittering towers symbolized ambition and success. To Naomi, they had always been a battlefield. Every skyscraper was a reminder of the wars she had fought. Wars to be seen, wars to be heard, wars to exist in a space that was never designed for people like her. As the CEO and founder of Caldwell Motors, one of the most prestigious luxury car brands in the world, Naomi had not inherited her throne. She had built it with grit, brilliance, and an unwavering belief that true luxury wasn't about gatekeeping. It was about excellence accessible to anyone who could afford it, no matter where they came from. Yet reality, as she was about to be, reminded, has a way of bleeding through the vision. The letter lay open on her desk, its words a quiet punch to the gut. A longtime fan of Caldwell Motors had visited the Beverly Hills showroom, only to be ignored, steered away, and subtly told, without a word, that he didn't belong. He was ready to invest. He wore the same polished outfit as other shoppers. The only difference was the skin he wore. Naomi read the letter again, her fingers curling slightly at the edges. If what David Williams described was true, then somewhere along the line, her vision had been poisoned. Not by outsiders, but from within. She didn't call a board meeting. She didn't draft a memo. Instead, she picked up her phone, voice steady. "Daniel, book me a flight to Los Angeles. First thing tomorrow, quietly." No corporate announcement, no entourage, no fanfare. She wasn't going as CEO Naomi Caldwell. She was going as a woman, a customer, armed with nothing but her own eyes and instincts. As the sun set beyond the Manhattan skyline, Naomi packed lightly. Plain clothes, no designer handbags, no jewelry that screamed her net worth. She needed to disappear into the crowd. Only then could she see the truth for herself. Because Naomi Caldwell had learned long ago that power isn't just about sitting at the table. It's about knowing when to flip the table over. What she was about to discover would shake not just Caldwell Motors, but the very foundations of an industry. Too comfortable with the way things had always been, and she was ready, more ready than they could ever imagine. The wheels of Naomi's plane kissed the runway at LAX just past noon. The sun was high, painting Beverly Hills in golden light, making everything shimmer with an almost surreal perfection. Towering palms lined the roads, and luxury cars rolled by as if they floated, untouched by the dust of real life. Naomi Caldwell stepped out of a modest rented SUV, the Los Angeles heat washing over her. She adjusted the strap of her plain leather crossbody bag, took a breath, and started walking toward her own dealership, the Beverly Hills showroom of Caldwell Motors. She had dressed carefully for this encounter. A crisp white button-down shirt, dark jeans, clean white sneakers. No jewelry, no logos, nothing that shouted status. Today, she wasn't Naomi Caldwell, billionaire and automotive visionary. Today, she was just another customer. She was there, not to be recognized, but to be seen, or, more accurately, to test whether she would be seen at all. The showroom itself was stunning. A sleek glass box, a temple to luxury, gleaming under the Californian sun. Inside, the scent of polished leather and fresh espresso floated through the cool, climate-controlled air. Cars sat like works of art under perfect lighting. Polished Bugattis, Bentleys, Rolls-Royces, all gleaming, immaculate, and terribly expensive. Naomi, stepped through the heavy glass doors, her arrival barely causing a ripple. A handful of employees, sharp in tailored suits, floated around the room, engaging smoothly with customers who looked the part. She glanced around quickly. Not a single face looked like hers. A familiar pang, not of anger, but of recognition, tightened in her chest. She approached the reception desk where a woman with a perfect smile stood waiting. "Welcome to Caldwell Motors. How can I assist you today?" the woman asked, polite but rehearsed. Naomi smiled back, just as politely. "I'd like to take a look at the Bugatti Chiron Supersport." For a brief moment, barely a heartbeat, the woman hesitated. A flicker of doubt crossed her features as her eyes swept over Naomi's simple outfit. Then, masking it with professional efficiency, she said, "Of course. Let me check with our sales team." She disappeared behind the gleaming desk, leaving Naomi to wait. From the corner of her eye, Naomi noticed a man in a navy suit approach. He walked with a confidence that spoke of authority, his salt and pepper hair perfectly combed back. Richard Langford, the showroom manager. Naomi recognized him immediately from internal files. A man with a record of strong sales numbers and a few too many whispered concerns about his selective customer service methods. "Ma'am," Richard said smoothly, flashing a professional smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I understand you're interested in the Bugatti Chiron Supersport?" Naomi nodded. "That's right." Richard's eyes gave her a slow, deliberate once-over, not assessing her needs, assessing if she even belonged in the room. His next words were delivered with velvet politeness. "Do you have an appointment?" Naomi tilted her head slightly. "I wasn't aware that was necessary." Richard's smile tightened, the warmth evaporating. "For certain models, we typically schedule private viewings. These cars are highly exclusive." Naomi kept her expression neutral, her voice calm. "I understand, but I'd still like to see it." There was a pause, a moment where the truth flickered across Richard's face before he masked it again. He turned and called over a young salesman, whispering something Naomi couldn't quite catch. The young man, barely out of college by the look of him, approached Naomi with visible discomfort. "I'm sorry, Ma'am," he said. "But the model you're asking about isn't available for viewing at the moment." Naomi raised her eyebrows slightly. "That's interesting," she said quietly, tilting her head toward the glass partition behind them, where the Bugatti Chiron Supersport gleamed under the showroom lights, immaculate and untouched. "Because it looks like it's right there." Richard didn't flinch. His voice remained smooth. "It's currently reserved for a client." Before Naomi could reply, the glass doors behind her swung open. A well-dressed white couple entered, their steps confident, their attire no more extravagant than Naomi's own. In seconds, another salesperson rushed to greet them, offering champagne, laughter, eager attention. Within moments, the couple was being guided toward the exact Bugatti Naomi had been told was unavailable. Naomi turned back to Richard, her gaze steady. "That seems like a contradiction." Richard's answer came smoothly, practiced. "They're long-time clients. We already have their financials on file. Saves time, you understand." Naomi said nothing. She let the silence stretch between them, the weight of his assumptions hanging heavy in the air. He assumed she couldn't afford it. He assumed she didn't belong. And most of all, he assumed he could get away with it. She could have shattered his smugness in a heartbeat, could have announced her name, her title, her ownership. But that wasn't the point of this visit. She wasn't here to demand respect because of her status. She was here to see who would offer it without knowing who she was. Without another word, Naomi turned and walked to a corner of the showroom, settling into one of the lounge chairs along the wall. She didn't storm out. She didn't create a scene. She simply sat, and she watched, and what she saw confirmed every fear the letter on her desk had stirred. White customers, even those dressed casually, were treated like royalty. Brochures, beverages, private showings offered without hesitation. Customers of color, regardless of their style or confidence, were quietly redirected, subtly steered toward lower-end models, or ignored altogether. Naomi didn't need a corporate audit to see the truth. It was playing out in real time right in front of her. An impeccably dressed black man entered the showroom. Naomi watched as he was quickly, almost surgically, pushed toward the entry level. Models, under the polite guise of finding the right fit. No test drive offers, no champagne, no access to the crown jewels of the showroom floor. An hour passed. No one returned to offer Naomi help. No one cared that she was still sitting there. Finally, Naomi stood up. She didn't slam the door as she left. She didn't shout. She simply walked out into the warm California sun, the weight of what she had uncovered pressing heavily against her chest. This wasn't about one rude employee. This wasn't even about Richard Langford. It was bigger. It was a system. A quiet, insidious system. One that could be, and would be, dismantled. Naomi Caldwell wasn't just here to buy a car. She was here to start a revolution. Naomi crossed the street to a small cafe that offered a clear view of the dealership through its wide glass windows. She ordered a black coffee, even though she knew she wouldn't drink it, and settled into a corner table. From there, she could watch everything and everyone without being noticed. She hadn't left the showroom in anger. That was too easy. No, she left with her mind sharper than ever, with a clarity that only comes from witnessing injustice up close, laid bare, undeniable. Inside the showroom, the pattern continued, unfolding with a brutal kind of consistency. Naomi watched as customers arrived and were sorted in real time like livestock. Those who fit the mold, white, affluent-looking, visibly adorned with the right badges of wealth, were greeted warmly, ushered into private viewings, offered champagne like old friends. Those who didn't fit, people of color, customers dressed modestly, those whose wealth didn't scream from every fiber of their clothing, were subtly, methodically, pushed aside. It was subtle enough that someone who wasn't paying attention might have missed it. But Naomi Caldwell was paying attention. She saw it in every crossed arm, every delayed greeting, every fake smile stretched a little too thin. She saw it in the way salespeople's eyes flicked past certain customers, looking for someone else they deemed more appropriate. It wasn't individual bias. It was a culture, a system, perfectly rehearsed, perfectly executed. Naomi stirred, her coffee absently as her gaze caught on a young black man entering the showroom. His posture was confident, his clothes sharply tailored. Everything about him screamed success. Yet, as he wandered closer to one of the premium display cars, Naomi watched the way a salesman intercepted him. The conversation was brief, dismissive. Instead of being encouraged to explore the top models, he was gently redirected toward the lower-end vehicles. Naomi leaned back in her chair, feeling the familiar burn of frustration rise in her chest. It was happening again, right there in front of her. Moments later, a casually dressed white couple, a man in a polo shirt, a woman in a flowing sundress, entered. Their reception could not have been more different. Within seconds, they were swarmed by salespeople, laughing and smiling, champagne glasses materializing in their hands as if by magic. No hesitation, no silent judgment, no need to qualify them. They simply belonged. Naomi pressed her fingertips lightly against the rim of her coffee cup. She wasn't angry. Anger was easy. Anger burned hot and bright, then faded. What she felt was colder, deeper. Resolve. She had seen what she needed to see, but just as she was preparing to leave, her eyes caught on something, or rather, someone. A young woman, no more than 25, standing near the reception desk, tablet clutched tightly in her hands. Her auburn hair was pulled back into a neat ponytail, and her beige blazer was almost too crisp, too perfect, like she was trying hard to fit in. Naomi recognized that tension instantly. The strain of someone trying to survive in a system they didn't fully agree with. Maria Torres. Naomi had noticed her earlier, had seen the way her gaze flickered between customers and co-workers, like she was constantly second-guessing the rules she had been taught. And then, a small moment, a crack in the facade that revealed everything. A middle-aged black woman entered the showroom, her smile warm, hopeful as she approached the reception desk. Naomi watched as Maria engaged with her, nodding eagerly, tablet ready, a genuine willingness to help shining through. But before Maria could even take a step toward the customer, Richard Langford appeared like a shadow at her shoulder. With a subtle, practiced tilt of his head, he redirected Maria elsewhere, and the black woman was left standing awkwardly alone, unassisted. Within moments, she turned and quietly exited the showroom. Maria hesitated, just for a moment, before obeying Richard's unspoken command. That hesitation was everything. Naomi set her untouched coffee down, left a $20 bill under the cup, and stood up. She crossed the street back to the showroom, her steps steady, deliberate. She wasn't going back to confront Richard Langford. She had no interest in another performance of fake politeness. No, Naomi Caldwell was walking back in for something, much more dangerous to the system than anger. Connection. Inside, the energy remained the same. Sleek, polished, exclusionary. Naomi didn't spare Richard a glance. Instead, she walked straight up to Maria Torres. The young woman startled slightly, her fingers tightening around the tablet. "Hi," Naomi said, her voice smooth, friendly. "I was hoping you could help me. I'd like to take a closer look at one of the vehicles." Maria hesitated, her eyes darting instinctively toward Richard before she answered. Naomi saw the internal war play across her face, the pull between obedience and decency. "Which model were you interested in?" Maria asked, her voice careful. "The Bugatti Chiron Supersport," Naomi replied, keeping her tone casual. Maria's fingers twitched slightly against the tablet. Naomi could see it, the hesitation, the fear. She knew exactly what would happen if she tried to assist Naomi openly. And yet, there it was again, that flicker of something true, something rebellious in Maria's eyes. "That particular model is reserved," Maria started, her voice tight. Naomi leaned in slightly, her voice low, almost gentle. "You don't have to do this," she said. Maria's head snapped up, eyes wide. "Pretend there's a reason I can't see that car," Naomi continued, her voice calm but heavy with meaning. "We both know it's right there." For a moment, Maria looked like she might speak, might break open the fragile system with a single sentence. But then Richard's voice sliced through the air. "Maria!" Both women turned. Richard was striding toward them, all controlled menace and tight professionalism. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, voice even but sharp underneath. Maria straightened immediately, her body stiffening under his gaze. "No, sir." "Good." Richard's cold eyes flicked to Naomi. "As I mentioned earlier," he said smoothly, "we don't have anything available that would be a good fit for you." It was so casual, so dismissive, Naomi almost laughed. But there was no humor in it, only the cold truth. Maria said nothing, but Naomi saw the tension in her jaw, the way her hands gripped the tablet just a little too tightly. Small acts of defiance, the only acts she could afford in that moment. Naomi didn't push further. She knew when to step back. As she turned to leave, she reached into her bag and pulled out a simple business card. She set it on the desk, just within Maria's line of sight. No titles, no logos, just a name and a number. "If you ever want to talk," the card said without needing to say it aloud. As Naomi walked back into the blinding California sun, she knew the first spark had been lit. And sometimes, a spark is all it takes to start a fire. Maria Torres sat in her compact car parked behind the dealership, the sunlight slipping away into the quiet hum of early evening. She gripped the small, simple business card in her hand so tightly that the edges had begun to bend and crumple. "Naomi Caldwell," it read. No corporate title, no fancy logo, just a name, just a number. But Maria knew exactly who Naomi was. She knew even before she had dared to Google it on her phone during a quick break. Billionaire CEO, founder of Caldwell Motors, the very company whose showroom she was now complicit in tarnishing. Her heart thudded painfully against her ribs as she stared at the card. Calling that number would mean making a choice. It would mean stepping off the safe, narrow path she had been tiptoeing along for the last 2 years. It would mean risking everything. Her job, her reputation, her financial security. She had debts, bills, dreams she hadn't yet dared to dream out loud. She had built her survival on the fragile hope that if she just kept her head down, she could outlast the ugliness. But today had cracked something wide open inside her. Maria exhaled sharply, tossed the card onto the passenger seat, rubbed her temples, and stared at her reflection in the rearview mirror. She looked tired, hollowed out, like someone who had been holding her breath for too long. She thought about the black woman who had been turned away without even a second glance, the quiet, resigned look on her face as she left. Maria thought about Naomi standing there, dignity wrapped around her like armor, even as the system tried to strip it away. Without allowing herself another second to reconsider, Maria snatched the card back up, unlocked her phone, and dialed. The number, it rang once, twice. Then a calm, steady voice answered, as if it had been waiting all along. "This is Naomi." Maria swallowed, her throat dry. It's Maria. Maria Torres, from the showroom." A beat of silence, then Naomi's voice softened. "I'm glad you called." Maria squeezed her eyes shut, heart hammering so loud she could barely think. I don't even know why I did. I shouldn't be calling you." "I think you do know," Naomi said gently, the kindness in her tone cutting through Maria's fear like a warm blade. "You're calling because you know what's happening isn't right." Maria let out a shaky breath, glancing out her window like she expected someone to be standing there, listening. Yeah, I do." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I want to meet, but it has to be somewhere private." Naomi's answer was immediate, calm. "There's a cafe on West 3rd, quiet. Do you know it?" Maria nodded instinctively. "Yeah, 20 minutes. "Good," Naomi said. "I'll be waiting." Maria hung up before her courage could evaporate. 20 minutes later, she pushed open the door of the cafe and stood for a moment in the threshold, scanning the room. Naomi was already there, seated in the farthest, darkest corner. She raised her hand slightly, a small, welcoming gesture, and Maria's knees almost buckled with relief and terror at the same time. She made her way over, standing awkwardly beside the table, gripping the back of the chair like a life raft. "I shouldn't be here," Maria whispered, her voice raw. "But you are," Naomi said simply, her voice containing no judgment, only understanding. That quiet acceptance broke something inside Maria, and she sank into the chair, shoulders sagging under the invisible weight she'd been carrying for so long. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. Naomi let the silence stretch, giving Maria space to gather herself. Finally, Maria broke it, her voice low, urgent. "You don't understand," she said, shaking her head. "It's worse than you think. It's not just that one day, that one customer. It's built into everything we do at that showroom. It's how we're trained, how we're expected to work." Naomi's face remained composed, but Maria could see the flicker of steel behind her calm eyes. "Tell me," Naomi said quietly. Maria glanced around nervously before leaning in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "There are unofficial rules," Maria said. "They don't put them in writing, but we all know. They train us to profile customers the moment they walk in. Not just how they're dressed, not just their attitude, their race, their skin color." Naomi's jaw tightened slightly, but she didn't interrupt. Maria's words tumbled out faster now, years of suppressed guilt and fear bursting free. "If someone white walks in, even if they're dressed casual, we roll out the red carpet. Offer them test drives, champagne, full, access to everything. But if it's a person of color, unless they're famous, unless they're a known entity, We're supposed to steer them away from the high-end models. Politely, of course, subtly. Make it seem like we're helping them find the right fit. But it's gatekeeping. It's discrimination, plain and simple. She looked down at her hands, twisting them together in her lap. I used to tell myself it wasn't my fault, that I couldn't change anything. But today, Maria's voice cracked. Today, I couldn't pretend anymore. Naomi reached across the table, her hand resting lightly on the edge of Maria's. You don't have to pretend anymore, she said. You're doing the right thing now. Maria lifted her head, her eyes shining with fear. And something else. Hope. What happens now? She asked. Naomi's voice was calm, but underneath it was a storm brewing. Now, we build the case. Quietly, carefully. I can't take this public until I have proof, real proof. And if you're willing, Maria, you can help me get it. Maria's eyes widened in terror. You mean spy? Naomi shook her head. Not spy. Watch. Document. Tell the truth when the time comes. Maria looked down again, the internal war raging behind her eyes. If I get caught, she whispered. You won't, Naomi said, her voice low and certain. I'll protect you, as much as I can, but you have to decide for yourself. No, one can force you. Maria sat there for a long, long moment. Then she lifted her chin and met Naomi's gaze squarely. I'm tired of being afraid, she said. Naomi smiled then, not a triumphant smile, but a fierce, proud one. So am I. Outside, the city moved on, oblivious. Inside that small cafe, two women forged an unspoken pact, a fragile alliance born not out of ambition, but out of something far more dangerous to the old systems that ruled the world, conviction. And that night, as Maria Torres drove home, the business card still clutched in her hand, she knew that her life had just split into two eras, before and after the call. The next morning, Naomi dressed simply, just as she had before. A crisp white shirt, dark jeans, clean sneakers. No designer brands, no jewelry, nothing that would signal her true status. She was intentional with every detail, the outfit, the posture, the demeanor. Today was not about being seen. Today was about watching. She stepped out of the black SUV she had rented again and made her way across the sunlit sidewalk, the Beverly Hills showroom gleaming under the California sun like a shrine to excess. Naomi's heart beat steady and calm as she pulled open the heavy glass doors and stepped inside. The showroom felt the same, polished floors reflecting the gleaming chrome of high-end vehicles, the soft murmur of salespeople working their magic on acceptable clients, the faint, expensive aroma of leather and espresso. It was all a performance, a curated fantasy where only the right kind of customer got to belong. Naomi walked past the receptionist without waiting for acknowledgement. She wasn't here to ask for permission. This time, she didn't approach Richard Langford. She had seen all she needed from him. No, today she chose another target. A young woman in a sharp navy blazer standing near the sedans, tablet in hand. Excuse me, Naomi said politely. The woman looked up, smiled in that rehearsed hollow way that all luxury sales associates seem to perfect. Good morning, ma'am. How can I help you? I'd like to take a look at the Bugatti Chiron Supersport, Naomi said, tilting her head toward the shimmering car gleaming behind the glass partition. The woman's smile didn't even flicker. Naomi watched closely, saw the familiar calculation flash behind her eyes, the quick scan of Naomi's outfit, the mental judgment forming. I'm sorry, the salesperson said smoothly. That particular model isn't available for viewing at the moment. Naomi kept her expression neutral. Are you sure? I was here yesterday. I saw it on display. The woman's smile remained firmly in place, but the edges of it tightened, slightly. Unfortunately, it's currently reserved for a client. Naomi nodded slowly, as if she accepted it. But inside, the fury she kept tightly leashed coiled tighter. It was exactly as Maria had said. Exactly as Naomi had seen with her own eyes before. Nothing had changed, not even after her first visit. The discrimination wasn't about bad luck or individual prejudice. It was standard procedure. She offered a polite, "Thank you anyway," and turned to leave. As she pushed through the heavy glass doors and stepped into the sunlight, she pulled out her phone. Time for phase 2. She dialed. Daniel. He picked up instantly. "Time to run the test," she said simply. "I'm already on it," Daniel replied. He's about to walk in. Naomi tucked herself into a shaded alcove across the street, blending into the bustling Beverly Hills. Foot traffic. She kept her sunglasses on, her body language casual, but her focus razor-sharp. 20 minutes later, a man in his mid-40s emerged from a sleek black rental car. His posture radiated the easy confidence of someone used to being taken seriously. He wore a navy blazer, tailored slacks, polished loafers, nothing overtly flashy, but unmistakably expensive. Michael Reeves, old friend of Daniel's, successful, entrepreneur, and most importantly today, a white man. Naomi watched as Michael crossed the street, pulled open the showroom doors and stepped inside. Instantly, like moths to a flame, the salespeople reacted. Naomi saw the body language shift. Smiles grew warmer, posture more engaged. It was subtle, but not if you were looking for it, and Naomi was. Within seconds, a salesperson approached Michael, all polished charm and open enthusiasm. Naomi watched from her corner, every nerve alert. Coffee was offered. A seat in the plush private lounge was arranged. Smiles everywhere, and then, the final blow. Michael asked to see the Bugatti Chiron Supersport, and without hesitation, without a single fabricated excuse, Richard Langford himself appeared, all effortless warmth and polished corporate hospitality. "Welcome, sir," Richard said, extending his hand. "I understand you're interested in the Chiron Supersport. Let me personally give you a tour." Naomi's stomach twisted, not with surprise, but with a cold satisfaction. She tapped her phone once, ensuring Daniel's recording device across the street was capturing every moment. She watched as Richard led Michael across the glossy floor, past the velvet ropes, to the very car Naomi had been denied access to mere minutes earlier. She watched as Richard opened the car door for him with a flourish. She watched as the charade played out, exactly as she had predicted. 20 minutes later, Michael exited the building, his expression hard as he passed by Naomi's corner. "They couldn't have been more accommodating," he muttered under his breath. Naomi allowed herself a small, grim smile. She now had undeniable proof, not suspicion, not anecdote, evidence. She opened the video file Daniel had just sent to her phone and played it once, watching Richard's warm handshake, his polished sales pitch, the open access he had granted without hesitation. She watched the tape once, more, slower this time. Every second confirmed what she already knew. This wasn't individual bias. It was company policy, unspoken, but enforced with terrifying precision. She tucked the phone back into her bag, her mind already racing ahead. This wasn't just about Richard Langford anymore. This was about everyone who had allowed this system to fester inside Caldwell Motors. The silent complicity, the whispered rules, the invisible gates they built to keep people like her out. Naomi Caldwell stood there for a moment longer, the California sun warming her shoulders. She had seen enough. She had the proof. And now, it was time to dismantle the empire Richard Langford thought he had built on invisible barriers, brick by brick. Naomi didn't rush. Precision was more important now than speed. She returned to her hotel, sat by the broad glass window overlooking Los Angeles, and replayed the footage one more time. Every detail was damning. Every smile, every handshake, every moment of discrimination captured in perfect, undeniable clarity. She could feel the weight of the next decision pressing against her chest, but she didn't flinch. There was no room for hesitation anymore. She dialed Daniel. "Did you get a clean recording?" she asked. "Crisp as a winter morning," Daniel replied. a hint of grim satisfaction in his voice. Audio, video, time-stamped, geotagged. No one's wriggling out of this. Naomi leaned back in the chair, staring out at the horizon where the city bled into sunset gold. Good. Let's start by rattling their cage. Daniel didn't need further instructions. He knew exactly what she meant. That night, an email quietly arrived in the corporate inbox at Caldwell Motors headquarters. The sender was a journalist's name no one recognized, an identity crafted by Daniel's connections in media, credible enough to spark panic, but impossible to trace. The subject line was simple: inquiry regarding alleged discriminatory practices at Caldwell Motors, Beverly Hills. The body of the email was sharper. Dear Caldwell Motors PR team, we have received multiple reports from reliable sources regarding allegations of racially discriminatory customer service practices at your Beverly Hills showroom. Specifically, it is alleged that customers are being assessed based on race and appearance before being offered access to certain luxury vehicles. We have also been informed there may be documented evidence supporting these claims. Before proceeding with publication, we are reaching out to request a statement or comment from your corporate office. Please advise if a spokesperson will be available within 48 hours. Regards, redacted journalist name. The email was surgical, just enough detail to spark terror, but vague enough to leave them scrambling in the dark. Then, Naomi waited. It didn't take long. At precisely 11:32 a.m. the next morning, Richard Langford's personal phone rang. He answered sharply, his nerves already fraying. Langford speaking. The voice on the other end was not friendly. It was the regional director, his boss's boss. "Richard," the voice snapped. "What the hell is going on over there?" Richard stiffened. "Excuse me?" "We just got an email from a journalist asking about racial discrimination at your showroom," the director hissed. "Allegations. Evidence. Are you out of your damn mind?" Richard forced a dry laugh. "It's nonsense. You know how these vultures work, always sniffing for drama." "Save it," the voice cut him off. "If this turns into a PR nightmare, you're done. Handle it. Fast. Find out who talked. Clean it up before it explodes." The line went dead. Richard sat frozen for a moment, gripping the phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. Then rage boiled to the surface. Someone inside had leaked something. Someone was trying to destroy everything he had built. He slammed the phone down, stormed out of his office, and onto the polished showroom floor. The salespeople looked up, startled by his thunderous expression. Richard's eyes locked onto a single target. "Maria!" he barked. The young woman flinched but quickly composed herself. She set down her tablet and followed him back into his glass-walled office. The door closed behind them with a click that echoed in the silent showroom. Inside, Richard turned to face her, his arms crossed tightly. "Tell me something," he said, his voice low, almost conversational. "Have you been talking to anyone you shouldn't?" Maria's heart slammed against her ribs, but she kept her expression blank. "I'm not sure what you mean, sir." "Don't play dumb," Richard sneered. "There's a journalist sniffing around asking very specific questions. Someone's been running their mouth." Maria forced herself to meet his gaze, even as fear gnawed at her insides. "I haven't spoken to anyone," she said, steady but not too defensive. Richard studied her carefully. Too carefully. Like a wolf deciding if the rabbit was weak enough to pounce. "You've always been soft about this stuff," he said finally. "Asking too many questions, looking too concerned about things that aren't your concern." Maria stayed silent, her hands clenched tightly. Behind her back, Richard stepped closer. "Let me make this clear. If I find out you've been talking to outsiders, there will be consequences. Career-ending consequences." Maria nodded once, tightly. "I understand." Richard held her gaze a moment longer, then waved a hand dismissively. "Get back to work." She turned and left, her knees almost buckling with the effort to stay calm until she reached the employee lounge. There, with trembling fingers, she pulled out her phone and dialed the one number she knew she could trust. Naomi answered immediately. "Knows," Maria whispered. "Or at least he suspects." Naomi's voice was calm, but sharp underneath. "Of course he does. That's the point." Maria struggled to steady her breathing. He's trying to scare me into admitting something." "Listen to me," Naomi said firmly. "Stay calm. Deny everything. He doesn't have proof. If he had proof, you'd already be out of a job." Maria exhaled shakily. "Okay." And Maria... Naomi's voice softened, but it was still iron underneath. "This means he's scared. Really scared." Maria nodded, feeling a tiny flame of courage flicker to life inside her, as she tucked her phone away and stepped back onto the showroom floor. She realized something. For the first time since she started working there, Richard Langford wasn't the one holding the power anymore. Naomi Caldwell was, and the tower Richard had built so carefully, it had just started to crumble. Naomi moved swiftly, each step calculated like a grandmaster approaching the final move. The video evidence in her possession was no longer just leverage. It was the blade at Richard Langford's throat. Sitting by the window in her hotel room, Naomi stared at the city below, a sea of glittering lights, oblivious to the war waging above them. She opened her laptop, attached the damning video clips, and began crafting her message. She wasn't sending this to Richard. She wasn't sending it to PR. No. Naomi aimed higher, straight to the board. The email was addressed to Jonathan Fields, a longtime board member with enough sway to force a reckoning. Subject: urgent. Customer treatment at Beverly Hills Showroom. Immediate attention required. Her message was short, lethal. "Jonathan, I thought you should see this. This is how our customers are being treated at one of our most prestigious locations. If this becomes public, it won't just damage our reputation. It will destroy it. We need to act before the damage is irreversible." Naomi Caldwell. She hit send. There was no turning back now. Hours later, chaos erupted behind the closed doors of Caldwell Motors' corporate offices. Phones rang off the hook. Emergency meetings were scheduled. Board members demanded explanations. Richard Langford felt the walls closing in for the first time in his career. Sitting stiffly at his desk, he tried to keep calm when his phone buzzed with a call from headquarters. "Langford," he answered sharply. "We have a problem," the cold voice on the other end said without preamble. "What kind of problem?" "You know damn well what kind," the voice barked. "A board member received a video. A very clear video. We've all seen it." Richard's throat dried instantly. He licked his lips and forced a laugh. "This is being blown out of proportion. You know how many time wasters walk into that showroom every day? You can't seriously think..." "Cut the crap," the voice snapped. "We're launching an internal review immediately. If you don't get ahead of this, Richard, you're finished." The call ended before Richard could even breathe another excuse. He sat frozen, the weight of years of arrogance and impunity crashing down all at once. But he wasn't ready to go down without a fight. Inside the Beverly Hills showroom, Richard gathered his managers like a general mustering battered troops. He paced before them, rage simmering just beneath the surface. "We have a situation," he began, voice sharp as glass. "Someone in this building is leaking information. Someone is trying to tear us down from the inside." The managers exchanged uneasy glances. No one dared speak. "Effective immediately," Richard barked. "All internal emails regarding customer screening, profiling, sales prioritization, delete them. If anything surfaces that can be used against us, heads will roll." He leaned in, voice lowering to a dangerous growl. "And from now on, no conversations outside this building. No jokes, no comments, nothing. Is that understood?" A chorus of uneasy nods answered him. Maria Torres sat stiffly in the corner, pretending to take notes. Her heart hammered in her chest. Richard's gaze swept over them like a blade. "I'll find out who talked," he promised. "And when I do, they'll wish they had never set foot inside this showroom." The meeting broke apart with a tension so thick it left the room airless. Meanwhile, across town, Naomi wasn't watching from a distance anymore. She was moving. Sitting at a quiet corner cafe, laptop open, she coordinated with Daniel. He had secured the final pieces: testimonies from former employees, internal memos leaked anonymously, customer complaints long buried now resurrected. Every lie Richard had built his empire on was crumbling. Naomi smiled to herself. It wasn't just about proving he was corrupt. It was about showing the world the cost of silence and the power of truth when it refused to be ignored. By the following morning, the fallout had become unstoppable. Anonymous sources tipped off news outlets, bloggers, journalists, social media influencers began piecing together the scandal. One headline after another. Caldwell Motors facing allegations of systematic racial bias. Luxury car giant accused of profiling customers by race. Insiders reveal toxic sales culture at top Beverly Hills dealership. And Richard Langford? He was drowning. Investor calls flooded corporate offices, demanding action. Customers began cancelling appointments. Public opinion, once a silent tide, now roared like a storm. The final blow came during an emergency board meeting convened in Manhattan. Naomi sat at one end of the massive oak table, composed and unyielding. Across from her, Richard Langford tried to maintain the facade of control, but the sheen of sweat at his temple betrayed him. Jonathan Fields cleared his throat, signaling the room to attention. "We've reviewed the evidence," he said gravely. "The question before us today is simple. Does Richard Langford's continued employment serve the best interest of Caldwell Motors?" Silence. Then a second voice. "I believe Mr. Langford should have the opportunity to speak." Richard stood, straightening his tie like a man preparing for execution. He tried to paint Naomi as the villain, accusing her of weaponizing one isolated incident to serve her own ambitions. He spoke of loyalty, of brand prestige, of the bigger picture. But Naomi only sat, still and steady, letting him dig his own grave. When he finally fell silent, Naomi rose. Her voice was calm, but every word struck like a hammer. "This isn't about loyalty," she said. "It's about integrity. It's about whether we stand for more than just profit margins." She nodded toward the video playing on the screen behind her, images of discrimination captured in glaring clarity. "If we allow this to continue," she said, "we lose more than customers. We lose our soul." Silence fell over the room. And then came the vote. One by one, board members cast their decisions. When the final count was read, it wasn't even close. Votes for termination. 4 against. Richard Langford's reign was over. Security entered the room quietly but firmly. He didn't fight. There was nothing left to fight for. He gathered his things in silence and walked out of the boardroom. His empire reduced to ashes. Behind him, Naomi didn't watch him leave. She had bigger things ahead. This battle was won, but the war for real change was just beginning. The sun was setting over Manhattan, casting long golden shadows across the skyline. But Naomi Caldwell wasn't admiring the view. She stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of her office, arms folded, her silhouette a quiet force against the city's endless sprawl. Richard Langford was gone. The empire he had corrupted was dismantled. Caldwell Motors had survived the storm, but the scars would remain, and Naomi, she knew better than anyone that one victory didn't mean the war was over. As the first headlines praising her leadership began to spread, so too did the whispers. Some called her a disruptor, others labeled her dangerous. A few even said she had gone too far. But Naomi didn't flinch. She hadn't come this far to be accepted. She had come to change the rules of the game entirely. Behind her, Maria Torres knocked, softly, and stepped in, holding a stack of new reports. "Compliance rates are up," Maria said, offering a small, hopeful smile. Customer feedback is better than it's ever been. Naomi turned, meeting her eyes. Good, she said simply. But the weight in her voice carried something deeper, a knowing. This was just the first battle in a much larger war. The luxury industry, the business world, the silent structures that kept certain people outside looking in. They were bigger than Caldwell Motors, bigger than Richard Langford, bigger even than Naomi herself, but they weren't invincible. Maria lingered for a moment, sensing it too. The quiet before the next storm. You think they're going to push back harder, don't you? She asked. Naomi smiled faintly, a spark lighting behind her eyes. They already are, she said. Outside, the city buzzed on, unaware that one woman had drawn a line in the sand and dared the old world to cross it. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about publicity. It wasn't even about legacy. It was about justice. Real, hard-won, defiant justice. And Naomi Caldwell wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. She turned back to the window, her reflection merging with the horizon. Storm was brewing. And next time, it wouldn't just be one showroom. It would be the entire industry.